For day 14 of Politimas, we will be discussing the cons of every single United States president. As yesterday we did the pros, today we are doing the cons. First up, George Washington. The way that he responded to the Whiskey Rebellion could have been different, and that's basically his only con. John Adams had the Alien and Sedition Acts, which basically got rid of freedom of speech. Thomas Jefferson had the Embargo Act of 1807, which closed U.S. ports to foreign trade, which hurt the economy. James Madison allowed the British to burn and invade the White House, Capitol, and Library of Congress. James Monroe had the Panic of 1819. John Quincy Adams cheated Andrew Jackson out of the election, and he didn't accomplish very much. Andrew Jackson had the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears. He had the nullification crisis with the state of South Carolina, and he was one of the more racist presidents in American history. Martin Van Buren defended slavery. He spent tax dollars on luxuries overseas. He had the Panic of 1837. He had a bad economy throughout his time as president. For William Henry Harrison, he died a month into his presidency. John Tyler vetoed practically everything. He got kicked out of the Whig Party. He was the first president to have an impeachment resolution for him. James Polk was the cause of the Mexican-American War, and he was pro-slavery. Zachary Taylor didn't have much experience, and he didn't have views that aligned with the Whig Party, and he died almost a year into his presidency. Millard Fillmore had the Fugitive Slave Act, which forced escaped slaves to be returned to their owners if found, and this ruined tensions between slave and free states. Franklin Pierce wanted to be buddies with the South, and because of this enraged the North, and he repealed the Missouri Compromise. James Buchanan had the Dred Scott decision, the Panic of 1857. He allowed South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana to secede. He had the John Brown slave uprising, which increased tension between the South and the North even more. Abe Lincoln basically disregarded the First Amendment by suppressing media and arresting anti-war protesters. Andrew Johnson was anti-abolitionist. He was an extremely racist president. He failed Reconstruction of the Union. He tried to veto the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and he was the first president to get impeached. Ulysses S. Grant had a ton of scandals, and he didn't have any experience. Rutherford B. Hayes ended Reconstruction in the wrong way, and that led to racism continuing on in the future, like the KKK. James A. Garfield died way too early into office, which was very sad. Chester A. Arthur was very corrupt. Most of his reforms failed. He had the Chinese Exclusion Act, and he pardoned corrupt people. Grover Cleveland had an awful economy in his second term. He had the Panic of 1893, and he couldn't handle that, and he was also extremely racist. Benjamin Harrison had the Panic of 1893 as well. He was basically the initial cause of it. He had Jim Crow laws begin to come into effect during his term, and he had a very uneventful presidency. William McKinley didn't have a real reason to declare war on Spain except to get land, and he didn't do anything about lynching in the South. Theodore Roosevelt overthrew the Colombian government in Panama to create a puppet government for American interests, like the Panama Canal. William Howard Taft had the income tax passed under him. He didn't side with conservation efforts. Instead, he sided with business interests, and he caused a divide in the Republican Party. Woodrow Wilson is basically the most racist president America has ever had. There were more Jim Crow laws enacted under his presidency, and he created the Federal Reserve. Warren G. Harding had a ton of scandals. His cabinet had scandals. Everyone in his administration basically had scandals. He appointed rich friends to positions that they weren't qualified for. He threw alcoholic poker parties at the White House during Prohibition when alcohol was illegal. Calvin Coolidge signed the Immigration Act, which created a maximum number of immigrants from the Eastern Hemisphere. Herbert Hoover had the Great Depression happen under his administration. He didn't react fast enough to stop the effects of it. He had the Bonus Army incident, which was when a ton of veterans of World War I protested to get an early cash payment of their bonus certificates. FDR had internment camps for Japanese Americans. He spent money recklessly. He lengthened the Depression by 7 to 8 years, and he expanded the powers of the presidency. Harry Truman had the Truman Doctrine, which basically started this Cold War, and he was very threatening with his atom bombs. Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't stop anything doing with McCarthyism, and he had high taxes. JFK had the Bay of Pigs invasion, and he escalated the Cold War. Lyndon B. Johnson had the Vietnam War happen under him, which was total chaos. Richard Nixon had Watergate happen under him. He destroyed evidence of Watergate, and he tried to turn the CIA against the FBI, and he sabotaged peace talks in Vietnam. Gerald Ford had a relatively weak economy. He had an energy crisis, and he pardoned Nixon, which led to distrust of politicians. Jimmy Carter had high inflation, high unemployment, and the Iran hostage crisis. He also continued on the Gerald Ford energy crisis. Ronald Reagan had Reaganomics, which didn't achieve the actual goal. He cut education funding, he ignored AIDS, and he had the war on drugs. George H.W. Bush broke a campaign promise by raising taxes, and he handled AIDS pretty poorly, just like Reagan. Bill Clinton had welfare reform, which raised child poverty, and he also had the 1994 crime bill. George Walker Bush had the Iraq War under his administration, the Great Recession, No Child Left Behind, and the Patriot Act. Those are the cons of every single US president. If there was any cons that I missed for any president, let me know down in the comments below. I take the criticism well. And just remember that every day throughout the month of December until Christmas, we will be posting a brand new YouTube video. So stay tuned for tomorrow because there will be a new one out. See you guys tomorrow.